to a Twofold podcast special. It's been a while since we've done those. It sounds mighty empty. It sounds very, very quiet. But don't worry, I'm not by myself. Phil's not here. You'll learn why he's not here. But someone's here. Someone decided to drop in again for a special.
Hey, listen. Would you do a podcast just by yourself?
Would I do a podcast by myself? Dude, I have maybe, I don't know.
Like monologue.
I'm like those hey, it's Jake. Sorry. I was gonna do like a Phil thing. Like
well, try to do it.
I can't even go to that register of excitement. It's only Phil can do that. I could just be like, hey, it's Jake. Jake's back.
Hey. Yeah, I'm back. And ready for some rock and roll.
Dude, I have to warn the audience, it's been a while since we've done this, me and Jake talking solo. Usually it ends up talking about bending spoons, so word of caution.
Yuri, whatever his name was.
No, I don't know what the guy's name was.
We're not going to do that this time, though.
No. It gets weird when it's just me and Jake, so word of caution. It's a Twofold special. Jake and I watched something that Phil hasn't. So he didn't feel like he'll contribute much. So he's sitting this one out. So we're going to talk about something that came out on Disney Plus. It was made by Peter Jackson, and it's called
PJ the MeJ.
PJ the MeJ, and it's called Get Back. The Beatles.
It's called The Beatles Get Back.
The Beatles Get Back. That's exactly what it's called.
That's it.
It's a 3-part documentary.
With a beautiful gradient. I mean, yes. I love that gradient.
Yeah, it's a recovered footage for a documentary that came out quite a few years ago. But there was a lot more footage.
50 years ago, by the way. Did you realize that?
And Peter Jackson, with his great skills of refurbishment and remastering and all this stuff, decided to look through all this footage and audio recordings and make a new documentary that reveals the truth. Truth.
That's so true. That's a good synopsis.
Yeah. You know what's the funny thing is? I watched this. I started watching it just because of that, of like Peter Jackson. Did you watch this World War I movie?
No, sadly.
It's really great.
What's that one called?
It's like something.
I think it's like In Our Day, something like that.
Last of Us, Heroes of Our Days. Wait, what is it called?
I think it's called Our Time.
No, what is it called?
Look it up.
I'm looking it up as we're talking, and I am like this is They Shall Not Grow Old. That's the one.
Okay, that's pretty off.
Yeah, we're completely off. That one was great. So I was like,
so you watched that one?
Yeah, and I was like, oh, I wonder, like technology wise, like what did he do to restore this footage? And then I realized what this is watching it, and I got immediately hooked as far as like behind the scenes of music making. And then I stayed to learn about the Beatles because just so people know, I know nothing about the Beatles except their songs. I know their songs. I love them. I listen to them. Dude, I have so many like discoveries. I thought the George Harrison of the 80s and George Harrison of the Beatles were completely two different people.
Well, I think that's kind of the idea, right? Because he was like an enlightened man.
But this is like afterwards when he's like making like cheesy rock and roll songs with his like pyramid haircut. He looks like Peridot.
I know nothing about that George Harrison. I just know the Beatles one.
Oh, okay. Because that's the one I have in my head, and I was like, and I also knew of George Harrison of the Beatles, but I didn't know that was the same person. Hilarious.
So you didn't know anything about the Beatles at all?
Basics. I like there's the 4 Beatles, right? I knew their names. Some history of some stuff, but I was like not like it never. I don't think I spent ever time like finding out. Okay, just the general, like I would say, general knowledge that everyone knows about the Beatles.
Yeah,
I knew their songs. Most of them. Like it's those things. Like is Beatles one of those bands that like I would put on the playlist of like Beatles songs, and every time that would be played, it would be another song. Like, oh, I forgot that's a Beatles song too. If you just like, the songs.
Like you vaguely remember the melodies and stuff like that.
This is a Beatles songs too? It happens every time. It's like, oh, this one too. So it's generally that. I'm not like some kind of, Beatles man who knows the
Yeah.
discography and knows all the history and all the rumors and
The bits and bips and bobs,
and who
Oh,
said
the
what
bits
and who broke up the
something.
band and all this nonsense. This is a new area for you. How about you?
Yeah, so listen to this. I remember I also was not a Beatles man.
Mhm.
I can't consider myself a Beatles hardcore fan. I think I'm a Beatles appreciator. But what's interesting, I remember like maybe 5 or 6 years ago, I was like, you know what? This is enough of Beatles.
Darkness.
What's it called? Yeah, darkness and ignorance.
Yes.
I was like, let me go and actually listen just to their entire discography.
Okay.
And I literally went chronologically. And
Like the
the
13 canonical albums,
yeah,
or
yeah,
just
exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, like the
Old
Please
Testament.
Please Me, and then With the Beatles, and then the next one,
Yeah.
and so on. And the way I like to listen to or understand like bands and stuff is like I get into their history, I get into like the background and stuff like that. So immediately the first thing I learned listening to their discography was like there's so many different releases. I don't know if you know this. Like the UK releases first came out, and then they went to the States, and then it's all mixed up, and then their parent company who was releasing them in the States was like doing compilations that were not part of the album, stuff like that. And so you learn about that stuff, and you also learn about the mixes as well, like different mixes and stuff. Because I think that we're very used to nowadays, the record is the record, right?
Yes.
Modern recording,
Especially online, it goes everywhere.
forward. Yeah, and especially now it's just like print. That's it. Like we hear it, and it's just one definitive version.
Yeah.
It's very rarely have like a remix, unless it's a
actual remix.
genre remix. Yeah. And so that was my experience with the Beatles. I listened to the entire discography from start to finish, and
did you become a Beatles fan?
Tons of stuff.
Were you like, these guys are great?
Yes. Yeah, I think I did become a Beatles fan. And I think the reason why I became a Beatles fan is because it dispelled the myths of my own brain.
Right.
So the myths of my own brain were, I don't know how it was for you, that's why I wanted to ask you, is that I grew up thinking the Beatles were like, you know how like modern-ish indie bands are like serious and take themselves seriously, and they're like, my songs are the best, and it's like these are the
this is my art form, do not make sacrilege of it.
That's what I thought the Beatles were like.
Right.
I don't know what you thought they were like back in the day.
We can get into it.
You had no.
I did, like we on this podcast we did talk about and watch something Beatles related actually before. At the beginning, I don't know if you remember, we watched Help by the Beatles.
That's right, yeah.
Which was
on this podcast,
one of my first kind of like seeing the Beatles besides the music. And that was like, okay, what's going on here? Like they're playing characters, it's making fun. That was my first kind of like idea of like who the Beatles are. So this was my first, like, I don't think I've seen a Beatles interview until I watched this documentary. So this was very revealing for me. So we can talk about that, like my perception of what I learned and what I liked. But before we get into that, Jake's back. We're going to do this special. Phil's not here. Spoilers.
Belush special.
I don't know if there's spoilers. Maybe if you want to watch this, maybe there's spoilers. I mean, it's all about history. It's kind of known history.
So listen to this, Tim. I wonder what you think about this. I believe we can say spoilers because I think that my impression is I think a lot of people who aren't like music fans or / musicians / whatever, I think they might be under the impression that this is a documentary like in 1970.
Yes, the history.
And then, like the Ken Burns, like pictures and then cuts to the floating head, like Paul McCartney from last year. Oh, I thought that this was great. John was telling me.
Yeah. Oh yeah, the future. I was like, yes. Now,
because I had, for instance, a colleague at work, like on Instagram, I posted this like story. I was like, this is the best thing ever. And he like replied to me. He's like, I need to watch this. And I'm thinking to myself, dude, do you know what this is? Like, I really doubt you're going to sit through this. Yeah. And unless you love the Beatles, maybe he loves Beatles. So for anyone listening, if you watched it, you'll probably, get in on this conversation. If you're deciding what to watch or not, it's kind of like a fly on the wall. It's 3 episodes, each 2 hours long. So it's a 6-hour commitment of the Beatles from a very... It's actually longer than that, my friend.
Oh, really longer? Okay.
I learned it's like, I think around 8, something like that.
Jesus. Okay. So, and...
It's great.
So maybe spoilers on that. If you, it's going to be mainly talking about music. It's, I would say this movie is amazing for Beatles fans, and I think it's also great for music lovers. So even if you're not a Beatles fan and you love writing
I don't
music,
think you have to be a Beatles fan to watch this, to like it.
I wasn't, and I enjoyed it because I'm, a musician and a music lover myself, especially band kind of genre. So this is great to watch, to see something like that. It's actually very unique. Of all my time seeing any kind of behind the scenes or documentaries of a band, a rock band, this is very unique of what kind of insight you get. So based on that, if you were like me, before we get into the movie, I would like to give you a really short timeline of the Beatles. If you know nothing about the Beatles, just if you're going to listen to us and not watch the movie, so you get some kind of idea what we're talking about. So Beatles. So in 1956, John Lennon, he was a troubled teenager, abandoned by his parents, living with his aunt. He started a skiffle band called the Quarrymen with his friends from high school. Paul McCartney joins in 1957 next year, and then George Harrison, I think he's like 13, he joins as well. They changed their name to Beatles in 1960, and they go to Germany, Hamburg, and
that's interesting.
And they play in clubs there, like 8 hours a night. Covers and start writing their own songs. In 1961, they come back to Liverpool, where they're from, start playing. Brian Epstein, a record store manager, notices them, and he befriends them. He's their age, and he becomes their manager.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, he was kind of like the same kind of.
I was like 20 years older.
Nope. Huh. He does. He convinces to kind of like them to change up their kind of look. They were in that sort of 50s rock and roll leather pompadours, rock dudes, and he kinds of more serious suits and mod haircuts and this kind of like to be more accessible pop. He also gets them George Martin, who's like 10 years older. He's a producer. He'll become their producer for all their records. And then their drummer leaves and Ringo Starr replaces him in 1962. So 1962 is basically the start of the Beatles. In 63, they released 2 albums. 1964, they go to America. That's the whole American craze of Beatles. They release another
Beatlemania.
Yep, they release another 2 albums. 1964 and 1965 is the movie Help we saw. They also do 2 more albums. So they're cranking out new music, 2 albums a year.
Really often.
In 1960, this is 4 years from them existing. They stopped playing live because one is just people screaming, the PA's not handling, they can't hear anything, and also their safety of them and their family, they get attacked and all kinds of craziness happening. So they're like,
I did not know that until I started researching.
Yeah, so they're not playing live anymore. They're now recording band. They release this album Revolver, which is experiment with studio processes and recording and and song arrangements, and it's like it's a very different kind of style. So far they've been doing these kind of rock pop ballads, kind of like singy-songy about holding hands and loving each other kind of stuff for girls. In 1967 they released 2 more albums. They do the famous satellite broadcast, and their manager Brian Epstein dies.
What, the satellite broadcast? What was that?
Yeah,
one?
They were the first band to broadcast their live across the world.
Jude?
I don't know what it was. It was some kind of like BBC thing.
Could be.
So yeah, the manager dies in 1968. They do the famous going to India. It's George Harrison is really into transcendental meditation. They meet the Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, and they're going there to explore their. It's like famous, It's kind of like the whole India and meditation and spiritualism kind of influence comes from this for their trip. They also start their own.
It's interesting because they go as a band. That's what's interesting.
Yeah, all 4 of them.
Like individual. Interesting.
There was like those videos and stuff like that. They started their Apple Corporation's limited company.
I wanted to mention that. Yeah.
The label, and they
they left their low label Parlophone. And then they're like, let's go make our own.
To become technically the indie band.
It's a clever name, Apple Core.
Yeah,
get it?
Do you know the whole like with Apple, all the lawsuits and all this? It's with Steve Jobs.
Oh yeah, the backstory, right? I remember reading in the biography something about that.
Yeah. They was like suing each other because of the name. Anyway.
Yeah.
And then they released their White Album, Beatles, very famous, in that same year. So, and then we moved to 1969. This is where they, at the beginning of the year, record this documentary. Now, initially, what they wanted to do, since they haven't been playing live for a very long time, they want to do a live performance again, because they've been in the studio and they have been hanging out. They want to play live, but they want to record it as a movie and show it in cinemas. Then they decide, let's record the rehearsals and release it as a TV series before the movie as promotion. Then they decide, instead of rehearsing songs, let's write new songs while we're recording this documentary, and then record the live performance, make that a movie, but also make that an album.
Well,
that's what they were going into this documentary. This was their plan.
And what's even more interesting is that they gave themselves a deadline, like an artificial deadline. I think this was in January, beginning of January. They went into. They
gave themselves like a month or something, right?
Right. They gave themselves a month. Yeah, like I think 2 weeks was the original.
2 weeks to
2 weeks to write 14 new songs.
Write, rehearse, and then play them live.
Perform.
Yes, and all of this will make a TV show, a movie, and an album.
Yeah, the movie TV show, they flip-flop around between that.
When they're going in, this was the plan. Like they specifically.
I thought it was first the TV show was always the plan.
Nope, the movie was the first thing. Yep.
Weird. Okay, well, anyway. Yeah, they switch up those things, but that's nuts. That's the concept.
Yeah, so
2 weeks, 14 songs, and they haven't played live in many years, and and I think it was also the idea behind it was that they were that's also something important to say. They wanted to get away from their overdubbing techniques from the previous albums, where it's like they were doing a lot of layering and a lot of in studio dubbing, and this was the concept was to do it like. Just like not one take, but like
write the song as a band together, rehearsing it, and then record it like that, because they've been doing the studio thing where a lot of times only one of them would be working on the song, or they would be working on the song one person one time, and then next week.
That's also something I learned. They talked about how like sometimes they wouldn't see each other, and John would come in, play the guitar.
And they've also haven't been like friends for a long time. They all had new girlfriends, new wives, all sorts of stuff going on. They were traveling, playing with other people. So their kind of like musical interests have changed and grown and moved around, and ideas of what the
band
all kind
of like came into their own of like what individually they are like.
Exactly.
And different times in their
Which
lives.
is a very interesting setup to go into this whole to where they were recording it. So all of this stuff is recorded at the time. They don't release the album, actually, which is hilarious.
Honestly, that also was like I had no clue with the timeline. I always thought that Abbey Road was the last.
Yeah, and then they record Abbey Road and they release it, and then at the end of that year, John Lennon decides to leave the Beatles in private and tells the band
the battles are over.
Yep. In 1970, at the same time, the Let It Be album, which is the music from this documentary, is released. The documentary, like an hour and a half from this footage, is released, kind of making it kind of like about the breakup of the band.
Yeah, a bit of a
and also
breakup story.
Paul McCartney announces leaving the band, and technically the band dissolves in 1970. So from
legally,
exactly. So from 1963 to 1970, what is like 7 years essentially is the meat of the Beatles.
Like the Beatles run.
Exactly. Yeah. After that, in 1980, where everyone knows John Lennon gets shot by a fan. And then in 2001, George Harrison died of cancer. So I didn't want to end it on a sad note, just to give everyone like a...
Yeah. And then they all go their separate ways. And as we all know, they all had pretty prolific solo careers.
Yes. And they appeared
I think that,
on each other's stuff, except they never, all four of them, were on one thing ever again from them. Three's the max.
Yeah. It's interesting. I got mostly into Paul's solo stuff, but we'll get into that.
Okay,
once we
sure.
get to the movie.
All right.
So I wanted to mention, just also for context of the film, that it's split into 3 parts.
Yes.
And the first part takes place at this sort of like big rehearsal hall.
Yes.
The second part, then they move into... Is it the second part they move into?
No, it's the second part.
Studios?
The second part is like midway. They move. The first one ends with George Harrison quitting the band.
Mm-hmm.
They have some arguments over some writing of some songs. George is fed up with a couple of things we can get into, and then he leaves the band. That's the end of part one. Part one, they kind of reintervene. They try to talk to George. George comes back, and they all decide that's best to move to their Apple Core studio down there. There's this
one of the conditions that George had was like he doesn't want to do any more in that place. He wants to do like somewhere nice, else,
somewhere small, somewhere bright with good sound. There's this whole thing.
That dungeon.
There's this whole thing which was a tangent I got a little bit on reading. I don't know what the guy's name was. Some crazy mechanic they had who was a con artist, and he would pretend like he's making these. He made them like a mix board, and they got there, and it was absolute shit. So then George Harrison brought his 8-track or someone.
Oh yes. That's for Apple.
Yes, for Apple.
They went, and this guy is called Magic something.
Yeah. Apparently, this guy's like just like some like parasite who just keep lying about everything.
And by the way, Tim, he's also the guy who made that stupid guitar that they brought in. Remember that?
What the revolving bass?
Yeah, that's the same guy.
Why was this? The guys like that, they'll just be attracted.
And they're like, there's too much hiss and the equipment's horrible. And then, George's like, I got some stuff at home.
Yeah.
And then
they just use that. Just use his 8-track. Hilarious.
Anyway, so then they're in Apple Studios. They're recording, rehearsing, and then the culmination of the documentary is the now famous, which I didn't know was famous. I never even knew about this rooftop concert on top of their Apple Core studio in London. And that's it.
Yeah,
that's a wrap on the
crazy.
So a couple of things that's super interesting about this is that first of all, just to get straight into it, I had no idea that they had so much footage. Number one, and I had no idea that like they was so candidly shot, and I had no clue that like because most it's interesting. Most band documentaries for making albums, in my experience. Now I don't know how it was before, but I know like from growing up and stuff, 90s, 2000s bands, stuff like that. A lot of it's like sort of like a vlog,
yes.
It's like filming. It's very much like, people get reactions, people making jokes. It's very like you're part of you're part of the band, and they're kind of in a sense like showing off a little bit, but it's for fun. It's mostly for fun. But this was seriously like just candid.
It's for promotions
footage.
Usually, like it's like a promotional vlogs that kind of like it's either dramatic because it's like, oh no, they went through all these hurdles and then released the album, or it's more like we're so great, just like look at us. Blah, 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 blah. But this is you're mentioning that it's really interesting because were music documentaries a thing back then? Because I feel like documentaries were a thing, but I don't know how much of around musicians.
I have no idea.
Because like
historically I have no clue.
Yeah, because like one of the things that that I learned then through this movie and afterwards about the Beatles is like, we all know like the influential stuff, they pioneered recording sessions and, they pioneered the whole, we're a rock band, we're all going crazy. But one of the things that when I was watching this, what I realized is that, them and the Rolling Stones and the Beach Boys, all these bands from the 60s, they kind of created this whole idea of like a band, not a band of singers, but a band where the musicians, they're all a band and they're all famous and everyone knows their name, like the individuals, not just the singer. Because if you look at rock and roll before that, right, they're named after the singer and the guitarist, and the rest of the musicians are just the support there, right? And this is how it's been throughout the history. A band where all the names and everyone's equally important wasn't a thing. And what was interesting is like that came around that time, and it was very, very strong, throughout the 70s, all the rock and metal bands, the 80s, the 90s, and then the start of 2000s. And right now, that's completely disappeared. Like if you look at any, like in the rock section, any like new like artist that is like rock sounding, it's usually the name of the artist and the musician just background again. Like the whole idea of like the band, that's not, it's
sort of like a John Mayer type.
It's gone
scenario.
back, like like the revival of pop punk. It's like Kenny Hoopla. It's just a singer. The musicians are there just to play for him. Or what's the guy name? The more famous one. Damn it. Machine Gun
rock
Kelly
stuff, or
yeah, this is rock stuff, like contemporary rock stuff, like Machine Gun Kelly, like pop rock, like the mainstream stuff, not just like the bands playing in clubs. I mean, like in the forefront, the mainstream media, right? It's interesting, but even in general, like bands are not a thing anymore. It's all back to like how we used to be in the 50s and 40s and 30s. It's back to the singer/musician, and then everyone else.
I think it's also gotten to the point where, like, okay, maybe my view is skewed. I don't have such a good breadth of knowledge of the pop scene, but I think also it's become a lot more individualistic. Like, people are now known for, especially like in the rock genre, people become known for being YouTubers and stuff like that. Playing on the Instagram and playing on the YouTube. I sound so old.
I know what you mean. Like the first, it's like
their sort of personal brand and kind of who they are as a musician is like it's augmented now, which I think is cool. It's not anymore just about the album and the music. It's like, oh, they do pedal reviews, especially if it's like more like musician.
Oh yeah, the rock thing is very
other artists.
It's completely removed from the mainstream. Definitely, like
but I'm saying that's also changed. Like it's very individual too. It's not anymore like a band.
Exactly,
there are bands, but it's
crazy to me.
That's a good point. I didn't think about that.
And it's also like like they were. And I wonder what inspired them, because it was a very important, like they really pushed that, like, the whole idea of like they all do the singing and they're all important. And I
don't think anyone pushed it. I don't know anything about like the motivations of the Beatles, but I don't think they pushed anything. I think they just liked playing music together. And I think that they just enjoyed doing that and writing together.
Maybe it was just the right time for everyone, kind of like, because it's a very specific thing in the 60s that became a very, like, as far as like, the biggest thing, like bands, like with groupies and girls worshiping bands.
Sort of like that kind of.
Like, they knew the drummer's name. Like, nobody knows the drummer's names anymore. You know what I mean? They're celebrities too.
I think.
Unless you're Travis Barker, obviously.
Jack Conte and Ryan Lerman and those guys.
Scary Pockets YouTube folks.
Yeah. They have that YouTube show called Professional Musicians React.
Okay. Yes.
You know about that?
Yes.
I saw a few videos. But anyway, they were talking about kind of this concept about what you're saying is that previously, there was usually like a handful of people in San Francisco or wherever. I can't remember what was sort of the hub of music back then, that they would just be session musicians playing on all these albums.
Usually Nashville and LA. That's the two most biggest places.
And they would be the backing players for a singer or a songwriter, right?
Yeah.
At least. So that's kind of, I think, what you're saying, is that then it changed to be sort of a band format. And I wanted to ask you, do you think that the Beatles popularized the setup that has become just like set in stone, the drums, bass, guitar, vocals?
No, because like, that's basically, they kind of, what they did and what Rolling Stones did, they kind of just did the the blues and rock and roll of the 40s and 50s.
Mm-hmm.
Chicago blues is what maybe guys like Muddy Waters and all that kind of stuff that the Rolling Stones were inspired, or straight out Chuck Berry kind of rock and roll stuff that the Beatles, like John Lennon, liked. That was
because jazz also had, like, if you look at jazz, like the instrumentation was drums, upright bass, piano. So and
there were a lot of bands doing this in the 60s as well. So it's kind of like, I don't know if
I think I meant more like popularized in the sense of like that they become a little bit of the template for everyone to like, oh, we'll start a band too. Something like that.
I definitely think, and I think that's kind of like similar what I was saying, but from a different perspective, that this idea of a band, like we can all be famous and we can all be this group and everyone knows us as a group.
Did you hear them mention Zeppelin? They're like,
oh yeah,
they mentioned Jimmy Page. It's funny because we're watching it now in modern times. Like, what?
Wait, it was hilarious because they said he's talking about, it was Glenn, their producer, their engineer, sorry. Glenn Johnson.
That's right. Oh, that's right. He's talking to George, I think.
Because he recorded, engineered, and produced the first Led Zeppelin, and he's talking about John Paul Jones, and he says he's the governor, which is so funny because like he's the boss. He was just saying it was so cool. It was like, it's so funny they're talking about these kids recording.
But George doesn't know about. He's like,
no, because they didn't release anything yet. That was like he just recorded it for them.
Yeah,
and it was going to come out in 1970 next year.
Time.
Dude, this was like so amazing.
I loved the time warp. It was magical.
Dude,
I think it was such a great time.
I got so hooked it was insane. Like my wife was making fun of me because I watched the first part one evening, and then the next day I could not think about anything else. Like literally,
Oh man, same thing. I literally every night. You know how when you read a good book, you're like, I can't wait to go to bed because I watch it in bed on my phone. I won't say before bed, before sleeping. I'm like every night I'm like, yes, I get to watch more, and I'm thinking this is so great. There's so much left. I'm like, I just it's like slowly every day watching 30 minutes. It's extended to a week plus.
By the evening, Emma was like, you better finish this because this is ridiculous. I can't even talk to you because you're like completely absent-minded. I was like, any moment I had my brain just went to thinking about everything that's happening. So he's like, you better finish. So I was like, I started like 9, I finished like 4 a.m. I was like, I'm doing all of it.
Oh, you watched it all in one sitting?
The second two. I sat in front of the TV and I had to do it because otherwise I wouldn't be free. It was like,
I know. I liked sort of like, savoring it.
I couldn't, man. It was just my brain was consumed by like it's just, it was really well done. I think it's the thing is that it's really manipulated a lot because they all had mostly audio footage. So a lot of the video stuff is kind of comped in to get the general idea of it. And even though I think it's very, like, it's insane that how much it's kind of like manipulated and edited, it feels very, very realistic and real.
I honestly, it was so good. I think not even once did I really notice that it was comped.
Yeah.
I really didn't tell. It was interesting because at the beginning of the movie, it says like that the filmmakers tried their best, to reproduce certain moments that they didn't have footage for. And I was like, well, what does that mean? And then only later I found out that they had like, 100 plus hours of audio and like only 60 hours of video. It's amazing though. I wanted to mention just what I was mentioning earlier with like the Beatles, the band.
Yeah.
So when I listened to this discography of the Beatles, something that I think that dispelled the myth of my brain was that I, like I said, thought that they were a very serious band and they took themselves seriously.
What songs did you have in mind when you thought of like serious? Like what do you like hear when you're thinking Beatles, the serious band?
I think maybe more like later songs,
like Eleanor Rigby or something. You're like
something like that, Eleanor Rigby, and then maybe like some John Lennon songs.
Okay,
maybe even like Let It Be. Like more of like the dramatic, serious stuff.
Yes.
But all that came to mind was just like very acousticy, very like lyrics are very serious.
Yes,
they know their stuff.
Big metaphors and
big metaphors and like they because you grow up hearing like these are the guys who they were the watershed for everything. Everything comes from the Beatles.
I think that might be one reason of my it might be deliberate my ignorance of Beatles just because of them putting on this pedestal and me kind of like rejecting the idea like there's no way these guys, because everyone's like you like I remember sitting down with a friend and he was like playing me a Beatles song, I don't know which one it was, and he's like, how could they have written this is so amazing, and just
that's the thing, it's like just magic.
And it's like immediately me like
magic.
What? There's no way these guys are not like some super geniuses, some kind of
the
gods. They started it all. They basically started rock music. Like what? That's insane.
That's why I wanted to dispel. I wanted to dispel for myself. That was a bit of a mission, but I didn't know I was going to expect. I thought maybe it's true. Maybe it's partially true. And so it's fascinating to me that after listening to all their music in sort of chronological order, I could really tell through their music that was 100% not the case. Mm-hmm. You can tell through their music that they are not really serious people. Like, I mean, when it comes down to it, they are 4 friends who are making music, and you can just tell through the music and through the sounds and even the genres they're exploring through their songs. Like, I was watching a Paul McCartney interview, and he said that interesting about the Beatles is like no song sounds alike, which is very true for their entire catalog. That's something I didn't expect. There's
a moment in the documentary when George Harrison is playing this chord and Paul's like, "No, we done that. Okay, can't play that chord anymore."
Really?
Yeah. They're playing. This is the first time they're trying out "Get Back." Uh-huh. And it goes like do 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 do, bam, that Pam, and he's like, no, it's passe. And he's like, and Jules like, no, it's not passe if you use it. And then the whole argument actually starts from that whole thing of Paul like dismissing his little chord there, which is hilarious. But I just wanted to bring that up because you were saying like nothing sounds alike. It's funny because Paul's like, no, we done that, can't do that anymore.
But see, he was onto something, and basically, I just realized that they are even kind of sort of. I don't think they took themselves seriously. That's what I'm trying to say. And that was, to me, just through the music. I didn't watch any documentaries. I didn't watch any footage. I was just like, this is amazing. Like, this is my opinion. I think it has to be true. And so that's a continuation now of watching the documentary or the footage. It's just, I think that it's just 100% accurate, to what I thought. Like, they really are just four friends who were making music. And I love to see that, because I think it's so great to just dispel all that garbage that, that becomes part of the meta story of pop culture. And no one even knows what they're talking about. And it's just like so stupid.
It's just fluff. Dude, it's like,
it's just fluff.
That's like that. And that's my biggest thing I learned about this. Is this fact of, like this whole pedestal of these great artists, and they created everything, and it's just this fluff. And it's like, my musical, I guess, philosophy is written in like punk rock and DIY. You do it yourself. Mm-hmm. And all the business is just on top of that, that you should be doing. And then just kind of realizing that Beatles were just a bunch of kids who were interested in music, and they were just going through it and seeing this, like how it is in the documentary, and everything else is just the background. It's, in the first part where all those business suits guys come in and watch everything, they're just like the idiots who are like, the money counters who the fame and the hype, that's all them, These guys are just, they love music, and
like they would be doing that regardless. Yeah, that's the thing.
And they just want to play and make music and have fun and just like, goofing around and all of that is like, they're just a bunch of kids. And they are. Like, George Harrison is 25 in this documentary. That's insane.
Thanks so much for reminding me, because I wanted to mention, I have a couple of notes here, a couple of recommendations I wanted to throw out, and I'll pepper them through the podcast, so it's not just a list. Rick Beato, right? The guy on YouTube,
the YouTube guy, the YouTube,
great musical educator, YouTuber. He was talking about that, and I was floored when he was talking about the ages.
Yes, that's insane.
They were somewhere around between 25 and 28.
Yeah,
that's astounding.
And this was the end of their Beatles like this is the end of the Beatles. Basically, we're watching it, and
the end of the Beatles is the beginning of their like late 20s and plus. It's like, I was absolutely floored. Like, I watched the video that Rick Beato, he talks about that. He says more intelligent things than we can
we could ever
on a podcast. But that's a recommendation. Watch it. The video is called "Reacting to the Beatles Get Back" documentary by Rick Beato, and we'll put all these in the show notes.
Yeah, I'll put them in there.
And that was insane to me. The ages were crazy. I wanted to say that you were mentioning that how we're talking about they don't take themselves seriously. Perfect. One of my favorite scenes in the entire movie was them reading that shit newspaper article about
about themselves. But it's like,
it's so fun.
And I loved how they're like going through the songs, singing in funny voices. It's just it's so humanizing of like, it's because stuff like what you would do, and you kind of feel bad because you're not professional. And it's like, if it's the Beatles doing it, it's like the biggest band that ever existed. Like,
they didn't see themselves like that. And I think that's what's humanizing is actually
and the thing is,
I never looked at the documentary like any kind of historical document or something. I really felt like I was there in 1969, just hanging out, with the band and listening what they're doing and understanding sort of what their workflow is. And at the end of the day, all they're doing is, like, they get so bored of playing their own song. They're just like going through these covers and over and just playing this catalog.
And just like, just start playing stuff, because they like play together, for like Hamburg and all this stuff, all these covers together. So they're really rehearsed well together. So they can just rip into a song, just like, one man starting and then the other guys joining and just have a good time. I mean, that was like the best part of it. I think that was the hookiest. I mean, there's obviously the drama of like what's happening with the band and where it's going. Are they like are they going to do documentary? Are they not going to do the documentary? Like, that's the crazy, like the end, this, like you mentioned at the end, there's this rooftop concert. And I've seen that concert like 100 times on TV, million times.
That's crazy. I've never seen it in my life.
Like the Don't Let Me Down song.
Never in my life. I didn't even know they did that.
Like that performance, because I think it was played as a music video on TV. So that's ingrained in my brain, right? Like the
Wow.
outfits, like John's Lennon, the John's Lennon's.
Look out for his Lennon.
He's got this. He's got the hair, the sideburns, the glasses. He's got this brown coat.
Was it? His 10,000 dead raccoons.
Exactly. And then he's got the pants, black pants, white sneakers.
Wow, you know the whole thing,
dude. Like I have this image engraved in my head, and and
see, this is amazing.
And it's also Paul McCartney in that suit, and then there's Ringo in this red coat in the back, and then you got
wow.
George Harrison with the Telecaster, that Rosewood Telecaster. Like all these things were in my head since I was a child.
I had no idea.
And in my head was always this insane thing that was planned, and it was like this epic moment. And just by looking at the music video, and all these people are there, and this is like grand, blah blah blah. And to learn that it was like this last moment thing they decided to do, and then the cops showed up, and it just goes to hell.
And they freaking wanted to go to like Egypt or something,
and they didn't want to do it. And two like minutes before, they didn't want to do it. And they record the songs a couple of times, just like learning how. Basically, they're a bunch of kids who are terrible at making decisions and communicating and deciding on anything because their manager's dead, and they're just going through this thing, and just like that icon, like something that's iconic in your head, and I think throughout the whole collective mind of understanding how random and mundane that happened. I love that because I hate like you said, I hate fluffy documentaries. Where I hate, the most thing I hate, and this is in movies and everything, the movie magic. We won't reveal the tricks because it makes everyone seem like godlike, and it seems like there's this level of pedestal where these artists exist and they function on a level you will never be able to reach because you're not there. You can't do this. But like I said, my punk rock, it's like there's no way. They're people too. They have to go through the normal process as well.
I mean, it's interesting that we're talking about this, but I really didn't even think about a lot of that stuff. Like while I was watching it, I was really more interested in just seeing what their workflow is. Because I'm interested in all the bands I love, what their workflow is, and how they make the music, and what they do, and what are the little tricks, and because you learn stuff too. You like watch them, like, oh, okay, that's interesting. They did that like riff, and
so what did you learn?
Why did they hook?
Because I was definitely following that. But it felt like very natural. Like I wasn't learning any kind of like skills. It was very like jamming-y.
No, I don't mean that like actively learning. I'm just saying like learning about their vibes,
right?
As like the feeling of it, because that's for me. That's like I'm addicted to that stuff when I learn about bands and bands I love and musicians. I always like to understand more about their motivations and why they like that kind of music. And I love to see the different influences everyone has, like their personal influences and the kinds of people they are. And that's why I mentioned, for instance, like you look at the Beatles and you can see, and especially because now they're older, but
that's the essence.
Diverged, but they diverged personally in their own tastes and stuff. It was interesting. I watched this. Another great
recommendation. We should put like a sound. Ding. Boom, 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 boom.
Ba-ding. Is a video called "How the Beatles Get Back Reshapes History" by a guy called Elliot Roberts. Mm-hmm. He also did a fantastic review about Yesterday, how bad it is. And,
oh God,
he was mentioning,
just don't remind me of that. Oh, this just makes me. This is the antithesis of Yesterday. This is everything.
100%. Yeah, let's not mention Yesterday, but you can watch a video where he talks about it. That's fun. But he mentioned his sort of like love letter video about how much he liked this movie. My goodness. Oh yeah, he was talking about how basically all these individuals are changing as people. Like for instance, John Lennon's going to go become political, right? Paul McCartney's becoming a family man. Right, Ringo's, I guess, making a movie. That's always a joke.
He was Ringo the celebrity.
George becomes,
I forgot about the whole movie. The whole idea of them having that set is because Ringo was shooting a movie and they let them.
I was so like checked out of that movie thing. I have no idea what that was about.
So do you remember? But it's hilarious that the reason that they had the whole.
That's what they went to the studio.
Yeah, the first studio because Ringo was shooting some crazy movie, and
it's like
that's insane. But continue, yeah.
And so, like, it's just amazing. I love seeing that because you can see all these individuals changing, and you can also see, I think, something that anybody who's, and it kind of a little bit reminded me, like, sort of when we, like, make music or made music before together, you really start to realize how personalities and what people gravitate towards really shapes how the dynamic happens between musicians. And it's just so amazing to me to see that. 'Cause I just love understanding that. John Lennon, for instance, you can tell he's kind of bored with the Beatles. At this point, he's already thinking of other stuff.
Yes.
And he probably has, other ideas, and he's probably, like I said, maybe even going outside of music. And, he has Yoko, his new, wife and stuff like that. He's changing. What's interesting to me was I kind of gravitated towards like Paul and how his sort of like attitude was to like the music. Cause I think that he was, and this is a Beatles history thing that I learned. It's like people thought that Paul was this bossy guy, who was ruining the Beatles.
Yeah.
But if you watch this, like I love this because he just dispels everything. You can see that Paul, he really is like the guy who keeps wanting to make the music. He likes this idea of the Beatles.
He's the biggest Beatles fan in that room.
Yeah. And he just wants to keep doing it. And he knows, I think I read this somewhere, he knows how special the dynamic is between the four people. He just wants to keep playing and he wants to keep pushing people. And it's so funny because like he's poor guy. He's like trying to like,
he's really bad at it. He's just not a natural, especially if it's like an equal kind of, if he's the boss, then everyone listens to, because that's Paul and you listen to what Paul says, that's perfect. But
right, if you like his solo stuff,
yes, exactly. Later, I imagine. It's like everyone's, but this is Paul's like thing. But this is when they're equal.
Like
it's just
John and Paul are like equals in my opinion. I think,
yeah,
it's just so interesting to see. It's like, and he's kind of, I would say he's more of like the kind of the very direct rock and roller guy. Like he's interested in just like, let's make. Yeah, what do you want to say?
Let's get into this whole thing. I'm actually interested because so essentially you have four Beatles, right? You have John Lennon, he plays the guitar, and then you have Paul, he plays the bass. He used to play guitar. Crazy thing I learned,
different instruments.
Crazy thing I learned about the whole crazy John and Paul writing credits thing that I didn't even know about. So for listeners, throughout the Beatles, if any song was written either by John or by Paul or together, they're always credited to both John and Paul. They had this whole
legally,
because they started writing songs together. Paul plays left, John plays right. So when they started learning to play songs and write, they could look at each other, sitting opposite of each other, and kind of look at each other's eyes and look at the guitar. And because like when you're right and right, it's the opposite. And you can't really look at the person's hands to figure out what they're holding. But if they're left, you're basically looking at exact thing. So they just kind of wrote and made these songs together very instinctively, looking at each other and writing. And they had this like partnership and how to write songs and how to play them. So they were this team. And then you have Ringo, the drummer, who came a little bit later, who kind of he's just there, man. He just plays.
By the way, listen to this. I have absolute way more respect for Ringo after watching this. And I think that he gets a really bad rap. Now looking back at it, I think that it's fun to say like, oh, he's at the right time at the right place. Man, he's a great drummer. Like, listen to the tracks. Like, the dude doesn't miss a beat when they're playing for real. Like,
he's just sitting there. They'll just start playing, and he starts playing. He never.
No one talked to him like, Ringo, do this.
He
just plays it.
He's a drummer because like there's drummers who are basically like, I don't know, avant-garde piano players who for some reason are sitting at the drum kit, and they'll be like,
I can't wait to like.
And they have like 1,000 drums and go playing melodies, and it's just like he's just a drummer, He'll just like he's there and he's like waiting to listen to the song, and he'll just get in there. And they have no notes for him, and he has notes for the other guys, so just play.
I was honestly impressed. I really was impressed by his playing and timing. Like he has internal rhythm, clock. Wow.
And then there's George Harrison, which to me, like I know you gravitate towards Paul and kind of understanding him, but I think for me, I don't have like I would say I would be a Lennon kind of guy just because of like his humor.
I think you're a Lennon guy for sure.
His humor and his kind of ideas and stuff I really gravitate towards. But to me, kind of like the anti-Lennon is kind of like a George, and I was really interested in observing
George, I still
him.
Can't really pin.
It was. The most interesting thing was observing George of like how, because he's the youngest one and he's really trying to get his songs to be played by the Beatles, and Paul and John are not.
By the way, that to me like never made sense. Like they talk about this openly. They're like, even later, I think Paul McCartney mentions this in interviews now. Modern Paul McCartney, he's like, the 2-song quota for George on an album. I'm like, what the fuck is that all about?
Well, they hired him they hired him as the lead guitarist, right? It's between Paul and John. They write the songs. These guys play it, and he's the lead guitarist.
Lead guitarist, right? Yeah, I guess makes sense.
And he started, he's a musician. He started getting interested, and he started writing more songs. So that one a song per album, they start letting him, and he started write a lot of songs. And like the time when they stopped doing the albums, he was doing songs with Bob Dylan. He was doing stuff with other artists, and he was getting influenced by all this other kind of music, which inspired him. And he wrote a lot of songs, and he wanted to put them on Beatles. Mm-hmm. But I mean, it's like, that's again, we goes back to what we're saying. They're a bunch of kids. They have no way to communicating. Plus, there's cameras everywhere, and they're not used to it. And the whole recording of the audio, it's an interesting, like, because, the famous flower pot conversation. So in the second part of this, series, when George Harrison leaves the band, Paul and John go away from all the recording equipment and the cameras, and they sit in the cafeteria and they talk, what are we going to do about this George thing? Mm-hmm. Very, very straight to each other, thinking, what is this about? And then I got to give a shout out to the insane director who recorded all this stuff, the cigar smoking madman. He's insane. He kept annoying them about recording in Africa in this old stadium.
yeah.
He is insane. But thanks to him, we have. By the way, Pink Floyd did that. They recorded in Pompeii like 3 years afterwards. It's amazing. They should have done it. But anyway, it's not very Beatles. It's very Pink Floyd though.
Lindsay Hogg, I think was his name.
Yeah,
Michael Lindsay Hogg,
something like that. So thanks to him for putting that microphone into the flower pot.
I watched a video, and they were talking about how basically he was like a bit of a trickster, like in a positive sense, like to kind of fool them a bit, like where he would say like, "Oh, turn off the cameras," let's go talk in this circle, and the cameras are still rolling.
He's a madman. What can I say?
Like, props to that guy. Like, wow.
I mean, ethics aside of that whole flower pot conversation, but it's the most genuine conversation that they're talking about it. Like, okay, who's the boss? What are we going to do with George? Like, we're writing, and I could totally see it. Like it's this dynamic of, they're the ones who wrote the hits, so they have egos, but they also have feeling this, like, this is our thing that we used to do. And George is very inspired by different, like you said, different kinds of music at this time, and maybe they don't like it. Maybe they're not into that kind of stuff, and so it's really hard. When somebody who's not the main writer brings up these new songs. I think
it's also interesting. If anyone's ever been in a situation where it's like when you are not like a core songwriter of the band. I mean, I think it's just the fact that everyone should know that it's like, you're really going to be playing the little fiddly parts, over the main riffs, maybe you'll be playing some riffs and stuff like that. But I think that's the position he was sort of delegated to, especially during the beginning of those sessions.
Yeah.
And you can just see him in the corner. He's just like fiddly bits, and they're like, it's much more interested in.
I think the main, when he left the main argument, this is going to get really deep into like music making and stuff like, so I think everyone turned off their recording. So I apologize, but this is interesting to us. But he's basically, they're working, I don't know which song they're working on. It's a Paul McCartney song. And essentially, George Harrison is trying to figure out some like over the top kind of stuff, and he's doing some lead things, and he's messing around with the wah wah and everything. And I think Paul and John are trying to work out the song, like the singing harmonies. And like I said, they're kids. They have like trouble communicating to each other because you can clearly see what's happening. It's the fiddly bits because
they're like looking in each other's eyes, basically.
Yeah, and George Harrison is fiddling in his corner. He's trying to find interesting kind of melodic things in there, but they're messing with what their harmonies is trying to write. So, all they could say is like, let us go take a break. Let us figure out the harmonies, come back and then you figure out on top, what to write. But like, and Paul is like, I'm not trying to be your boss. And he's like, I'll do what you play. You know what I miss, Phil? I wish we could all do our Beatles impressions.
Just call me Phil.
No, I said, the one thing I miss about Phil not being here is that I wanted all of us to do our best Beatles impressions. But they're all like, but they're all arguing, and it's just classic, it's like the miscommunication, and and he's like bored, and he wants to put more flavor into the song, but Paul is like, this is how I want it. He has it exactly how he wants it in his head, and he's the whole writing with John. It's like it's so interesting to observe.
It's just so true. The dynamic is just nuts, and it's and then the famous, I didn't know about this, by the way. Apparently a lot of these things are like moments in Beatles history, which are like famous. I had no clue. Where George quits and he just like I think I'm gonna quit the band now.
No,
And they're like, when? They're like, when? Now.
yeah. I'll see you in the clubs. Probably find a replacement. But that's that's the archetype of a person. I know that kind of person. I love it. They're very quiet.
Yeah.
They're very opinionated. They're very stubborn. And it's just the way they approach things. I just love it. And it completely matches his whole, like, you know, spiritualism of the two dudes.
Yeah.
He had the Krishna guys.
Yeah, I forgot about those guys.
Sitting there. It's like very like, you guys, you know, he's like thinking of things deep. He's very deep about things and he's very grounded while, you know, John is probably off his head on some drugs trying to figure out his life.
I think he was, yeah, apparently he was
what to do.
and
Paul is in his suits and he's like, he's becoming a family man and he's like, Beatles, it's great, guys. Let's do this. Let's make another album. It's so funny, the dynamic of the whole thing. It's just like, they're so...
Yeah, it's interesting. I wanted to say that, I felt like it was interesting seeing the dynamic because I think, like, for instance, like I gravitated towards Paul because I think that he was basically just like, of all of them, he was really just trying to write, you know, songs. I think he was really trying to like write songs that especially like he liked, you know, whatever. And I think that was evident. Like, often, you know, I've been watching a lot of YouTube videos and stuff, and people are talking about like that famous moment where he writes "Get Back," right?
Yes. Oh yeah.
And it's interesting because people like, I think people are like losing their shit about this scene, and it's funny to me because it's like, I don't really find that necessary. I find that fascinating to see Paul, like, you know, like someone you know about, who's so well known as a musician, to see him getting into that flow. But I think that any musician will understand that that's like, you're just getting in the flow, you know, you're getting in the flow, and that's how you write music. I mean, I don't really know about
like how,
like sometimes it's in your brain, like you hear it in the shower, like it's in your brain, but most of the time it's just sitting and noodling and you're playing. It can take 3 hours, you know, you could make 3 crappy things and then, oh, the 4th thing, that's the good one. But this happened to be an instance where he was just really like frustrated. He was, you know, writing this riff, and it's like, you know, out of the necessity, just, oh, there comes the riff. And again, that also breaks those weird, you know, myths. It's like the genius. It's like, the genius. He's prolific. He's writing millions of songs all the time. Yeah. He just gets better at it. Just practice.
And it's like, Get Back. It's just like it's just like a blues, you know, progression. You know, it's 1-4-5 anyway. It's not something insane. But like, I understand why people were losing their mind because they get, you know, it was exactly what I was talking about at the beginning. You know, my friend saying like, how do they write these songs? Like what happened? What was the?
Wouldn't you agree though? Like as a musician, I think any musician would understand. Like,
being your song famous and successful, or being a song that your mom heard or yourself, it doesn't matter. It's still the same process. It's you still have to work
reading
through
an article years ago, which I wish I could find. It was a really good article. It was actually even a short article that was really talking about the scientific kind of explanation of how we create stuff, especially like art and music. And essentially, and this can be any kind of work, really,
any kind of creative endeavor.
Yeah, it's basically that your brain needs to achieve the state of flow, and that's kind of the term that's used to describe how your brainwaves kind of look like, and you know, those synapses and how those things connect and stuff like that. It activates a different mode in your brain, and that flow is really where you achieve you know, sort of your best work or whatever, the things that you're most happy about. But you need to get into that flow. So that means that a flow, you can't just sit at the piano and be like, the first chords, you know, of the song. You have to get into, you know, the mood. You have to start writing. You have to be
really inspired, like you know, you meet the love of your life kind of moment, and then sit down.
But that's the thing. You don't have to. That's exactly what the article is saying, that you don't have to do.
No, I'm not saying you don't have to be, but if you sit down and something poops out of you, like that, you have to be in a really big inspired mood to happen to that. Otherwise, you got to get into that flow.
Oh, you mean like immediately?
Yes. Like it does happen sometimes, but you have to something special has to happen.
And that's why I wanted to say distinction between like the shower thing, where like you hear the song in your head, that happens for sure. But most of the time, it's just you know, cranking out stuff, and most of the time it's horrible. It sounds awful, but then after 2 hours, you're like, oh, that's the one. So I think that's really interesting. I love when I learned about that sort of scientific explanation. I think that explained a lot of things to me about how music is written. Yeah, and I think that this was a really good example of that. And I think it's weird people are like losing their mind about that.
But that's good.
It's pretty normal.
Unless you know, they're just people who play music. Like there's a lot of people.
Anything bad. I'm just saying I was just kind of weirded out. Like I didn't
I mean, there's musicians who will know how to play, a catalog of thousands of songs and play them really well, and they would have never written a single thing, And there's like people like me who write every day, but I can't play a single song from start to finish. It's just the way I like about music. So I think that those are the other people who are like, how do you write music, and just seeing it how mundane and stupid it is, because it's basically you just write a song. That's it. There's nothing else to it. So.
But wouldn't you agree that it's kind of cool, for instance, that that it's like kind of like it showed it showed like a mainstream audience what it looks like to actually be
and it is the Beatles, the biggest thing that people were glorifying and deifying. It's them showing you how mundane it is. That's the best part. I mean,
yes.
I completely agree with you. That was the best part of it. And I think that's why people were losing their minds, because that was a revelation to them. Which is like,
because they probably thought that they sat in a room and like,
and then they smoked this big smoke and they sat down and they played the song, and because like we talked about in those terrible biopic movies, that's how it's portrayed in movies. It's they sit down and magic happens and they have the whole song written there. And it's exactly and this myth is perpetuated by so many musicians. Like I was listening to this Howard Stern interview. I don't know which music it was, and he was talking about, okay, how did you write that song? Just like, we just sat down and played it. And he's like, yeah, that's right. How come I always talk to musicians, the best songs.
Howard Stern is like,
and he's like, the most famous and successful songs are written in one take, because there's something. It's like, no, it's all bullshit. It's all just like.
By the way, I love this too. I love the fact that I was actually curious about this when I was starting to watch the movie.
Yeah.
I was like, I wonder how many takes they took of this. And I love that you learned 27 takes.
Yeah.
Like 27th take is the one they liked. And it just goes to show that basically,
or it's the first take. Doesn't matter. It's random.
Oh, yeah, or the first take. Yeah. I'm just saying, it goes to show that like there's no like cut and dry rule for this stuff. Another thing I wanted to mention that, for instance, this was before watching the movie. This was like years ago when I was listening to their music catalog. Help, the song Help.
Yeah.
There's this part in the song where it goes, "Would you please help me?" And it goes,
yeah.
There's a guitar that comes in there.
Yeah.
Amazing fact that they basically said that they couldn't play that part. They had that part in their head, but they physically couldn't play it. They weren't skilled enough.
They just spliced it up or something?
They had to overdub each part, like
nice.
in the tape. And to me, that like exemplifies exactly what I loved about learning about their music. Is like, it's not about the perfectionism. It's not about the skill. It's about them having ideas, and they like those ideas, and they come together and they play those ideas, they record them. And a lot of this documentary was about that, in my opinion.
Yeah.
It was really just loved seeing all that stuff. It was great. But I want to say, coming back to like the personalities. So a couple of parallels which I noticed, which were really fun. This is more biased because I was reading that Dave Grohl book.
Okay.
Biography. They came out called The Storyteller.
Yes.
And I'm a big Dave Grohl fan. I think we're both pretty big Dave Grohl fans. And I just love seeing the parallel. That's like Paul, like no wonder Paul is friends with Dave. I mean, like Paul's very Dave vibes, like in terms of in the context of the band. Like, for instance, like he just seems like a very like, sort of like high on life kind of guy, right?
Yes.
Like you compare him to John Lennon.
Yeah.
John Lennon is like, a little bit of the sort of like now known as a bit of the stereotypical, like musician, the sad musician. I mean, he's not.
Yeah,
I mean, if you look at the documentary, he's not that kind of person. But in the context of them too, he definitely is more of that, like, he goes into those like, deep stuff. And then, he has these grand ideas, like the whole peace things and his music that, sort of like explores that and imagine later. Right.
Yeah.
And then you listen to Paul's like a personal solo catalog, which I've been listening to more. It's
Maxwell's Hammer. Dum.
You know the history about that one? Did you read about that?
No. I just as a funny song. It was just,
they hated it. The whole band hated it.
Such a lame song.
Apparently, the legend says that that's one of the reasons why they broke up was like because Paul was like forcing them to do millions of takes of that song, and they didn't like.
I can imagine.
They felt like there was.
It's like the cheesiest song in the world.
Like he was like holding on to some like bit of glory days from like how they used to write.
Oh, it's
before,
like
and
this
they're
is
well,
this
we're
is like
past that.
old Beatles. It's gonna be great. It's called Beatles,
like
you know.
funny Beatles,
Yeah,
like
and they're like,
kind
we're
of
done with
tongue in
this.
cheek.
I can
and they're like, we're
imagine
done.
George
Yeah.
Harrison with his beard thinking about, the meaning of life, having to
the
play
universe within a universe.
having to play Maxwell's Hammer. He's probably hating it.
But I like to see that parallel because it's very interesting. Because I think that I think if you watch the movie, you can see that Paul he's very much like a very driven guy, but I think that he's very like down to earth. Like from all of them, he's very down to earth. Like he's the guy who's like, let's write some music and like let's make it the best we can make it. And everyone else is sort of like waffly. Okay, well Ringo plays everything, but John is like bored with the band, and he's like, okay. And then one day he's great. One day he's like,
it's probably like if he's interested, he's like great, and if it's not, he's just like,
yep,
exactly. I'm thinking about other things.
Like remember when they were recording "Let It Be" like for the millionth time, and then John's just like down there. He's like, the last of the sessions, he's just like, that sounds good. Let's keep that one.
But it's
and I don't know.
It's a funny thing you bring this up because you brought this up over text, and I was thinking about it, and one thought immediately popped to my head. I feel like this is maybe generalizing. I want to get your opinion on this, but if you look at the comparison between Dave Grohl and Paul, I remember one of the long time ago when I was like discovering Nirvana, and because I was first into Foo Fighters and discovered he was in Nirvana, and then getting into the Nirvana thing, and kind of listening to what Kurt thought of Dave Grohl. And in one of the interviews he said is like, Dave's great. He's such a well-adjusted kid. And, and he's friendly with everyone and everything. And it just made me think about this parallel of like, Dave Grohl, even he didn't have a dad, but he was kind of well-adjusted. He was, he had a very kind of calm, solid upbringing.
His mom was like a huge positive influence on him.
Well, Kurt's, it's all madness and craziness.
All messed up, yeah.
And it's very kind of draws parallel to, to John and Paul. Paul has a very, he was a middle class, both parents very established, very kind of calm.
I think,
and
though,
everything.
by the way, I think his one of his parents died.
Okay.
I think that's what I learned about. But I think you're right, though, in general.
And John's was like kind of all kinds of chaos. And these kind of things leave emotional scars on kids, whatever, no matter what kind of the circumstances. But poverty or kind of crisis with the parents, identity crisis. And maybe it's not completely related, but if you're drawing parallels there, yeah, I definitely see it. And that's the kind of music and their kind of ideas are like,
But it's even down to like, it's just interesting. I think it's a little bit random, the parallels, because we both read the book and stuff like that. But it's interesting to see because there are personalities that they, it changes how you approach even making music and stuff. I mean, down to like the drugs, for instance. John Lennon ended up, from what I read, addicted to heroin.
Yes,
for a time. Kurt Cobain,
I think even
heroin.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Dave Grohl, Paul McCartney, pretty like
some LSD,
like
some weed,
stuff like that.
Yeah, some
like have a good time. Yeah. Drugs, alcohol, cigarettes, that kind of stuff. And it's interesting. I find that super interesting because you kind of see those parallels.
Yeah.
Types of personalities.
It's kind of archetypes that, end up, that are building
archetypes. Yeah,
in the music. It's a very interesting. Yeah, it's a cool.
I don't think there's any right and wrong. Like I think that's stupid to be like, oh, Paul's better than John or John's better than Paul. Just different styles. I think everyone has their own approaches to music. But that was something that was really obvious to me.
And it's really cool to see, how and like, the ideas of when you're watching this, because you get to see them right. And you're like, when the spark, when it goes back to kind of sound rock and roll, like what's their meeting point where they're both loving it? And when one is completely bored from the other one's kind of style, it's just
that was so funny.
But it's so realistic and so normal and so...
It's so realistic. I want to say anyone who's like done music with anybody else, you realize that like, a song that you both like, you work on, it's going to really be fun, right? But when you bring in a song, the other person's like, I'm not feeling it. And the other person's like, I'll do it because we're friends and stuff. But
it's just going to go... Because it's just not going to be... And
that was Let It Be, for instance, in the movie. Like Let It Be was like Paul, he was loving that, But you could tell John's just like... It's like, super like out of it, but then they play a song they like together, know? And then probably John came in with his own song that Paul wasn't super interested in. But tell me this.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, it's just funny, like we talked about, like the writing of them two, and then kind of the them as a team and as a duo versus George and all this stuff, and not having him write the songs and all that stuff. It's just funny that I was after it was done, I was kind of like, let me listen to some Beatles, music now with a more new context that I've arrived. And I went to Spotify, and the top played song, Beatles song on Spotify, it's a George Harrison song.
George Harrison song. Yeah.
At the end,
Rick
the
Beato
irony
talked about that. Yeah,
is amazing. I love it. It's just like, yeah, let's do this. What it is. What they.
Yeah, he talked about that. It was so interesting. I knew that one, but I didn't know some of the other George Harrison songs.
It's all the songs, and it's in the end is George going, "Here comes the sun, la 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 la." Yeah, it's just it's so cute.
That's cool. So here's what I wanted to ask
you.
Go
ahead.
Yeah. Well, you seem to have
no. That was that was end of that topic. I have another topic, but it's unfair to me bring up another topic, so I'll let you.
Okay. Well, let me go into my topic, which is, what did you think of the songs they made up at the end? Because I have a pretty specific opinion. I wondered what you thought. Like, going through them with this journey, what did you think? Like, just sort of like, not necessarily, I don't think you have to like them, but did you enjoy them? Do you think they were good Beatles songs? Do you think they were cool?
I mean, here's the thing. So besides Octopus's Garden, which Ringo wrote, which I immediately fell in love with.
Wasn't even on this.
I wasn't, but dude, I was just like, I was like, what is this? This is pure. I need to hear this. I went to listen to the song.
Are you serious? Of all the songs,
but
Octopus's Garden.
It was just some purity. But okay, no, it's okay. As a joke, that's. But the other song that I really was, and we talked about like that in this movie, you get to see the process of them writing, figuring out, and then committing to like the version of the song, which is for a musician, it's amazing to witness. One song that is I don't know if it's titled that. Don't Let Me Down. That's what it's called?
I think so. Yeah.
That song is, people were freaking out of Get Back, which is a great song, and it's nice to see it develop, but it wasn't really what.
Don't Let Me Down. That's the track. Yeah.
Don't Let Me Down was the track that I was drawn to listen to. I think that's the one I knew the most.
You would like it because John Lennon liked it.
It's the one I knew the most sonically. And there's something really satisfying, and it's also very biased. It gives you this perception of that there is a form of a song that you need to arrive to that is the perfect form, because you already know what the release song is, and then you're hearing it develop. So it gives you this, it's like me always going about evolution. If people don't understand evolution because they see human and they think evolution is about going from a fish to a human. It's like, it's not. There's, it's evolution. There's no end goal.
Direct line. From the fish to the human.
There's no end goal. Human isn't the perfect evolution. We just arrive at the human at the moment. So it's the same with songs. The song, there is no perfect form. The song do know is the song that was released, right? At one point they said, we stop with the song. It is good. It is. So with that bias, it's interesting to hear because it gives you that feeling to hear that song develop. And so they have the song and they're playing and I'm like, this is the song, but something feels off. Something is like, there's something sonically is not right there. And then in the second episode, their friend Billy Preston, I think, arrives, and he's a keyboard player, and they're like, yeah, let's freshen up. Amazing. Join us. And he joins in, and in that chorus,
it's like the extra 20% that takes it to the end.
And he goes, and my ears just went, yes, there it is. That's what was missing. It was just like, that's what I was hearing in my head the entire time, because I know the song, but I didn't know what was missing. And it was just like hearing that, just like fill up that space and just make that song complete. It was just like the biggest like satisfaction you could ever have. Is like, there it is. That's the song. Oh, so good.
It's so
that was my song.
I have
what about you?
Very different perception, because in my canonical journey, I got to the end and Let It Be, and it's like I knew a couple of those hits, but I listened to it, but it didn't stick in my memory.
Right.
I didn't really understand necessarily. I was like, this is probably the last dramatic album they made, and kind of dramatic. It felt a little bit sappy at points.
Yeah.
So one thing I love about listening to music, and maybe this is different for me from other people. So I think everyone has different views on how they enjoy music.
Yes.
Some people, I think, I remember talking to Pishta Fulcrum.
Yes.
The artist Fulcrum, our friend. And he one time told me many years ago, it's like I was trying to explain to him, like, I love learning about, a person or a band. I want to understand who they are, what their influences are. what their take is and understand the story and the journey
Yes.
of where they got to making an album or a song or whatever. And he was like, I don't really care about that. He's like, I just care about the song.
Me too.
And I think there you go. See, I think you're in the same camp.
Yeah.
And I'm just not in that camp. I think that's a absolutely legitimate way to listen to music, and millions of people love doing it that way.
Yeah.
But this is why I love the Beatles, this documentary, because I think that I was on the journey with them, and I was understanding where this came from, and what the circumstances were and what they were going through as a band, and just what they're going as people, more importantly, not as a band, but like what they're going as people, and where what was the culmination that brought about these songs, and it was also like the struggle, to get to that rooftop, whatever, if you want to look at it that way, and to get these songs made and finished. Even if it's an arbitrary deadline and stuff, people wanting to, I think that's the goal at the end of the day, is like being a musician, is you want to, finish something, put something out. And I honestly loved the record at the end, what they made. But more specifically, I liked, I don't know if you know about this, Tim, there was a remix done, not a remix like techno, but like a mix of the Let It Be album.
There's like 1,000 releases. Like they mixed, some guy mixed it, didn't let the original engineers mix it. Then some songs didn't even make it. Like it's complicated. I have no idea what actually went down.
But this is a very specific. This is a specific mix because it was overseen by Paul and Ringo in 2003.
Okay,
and I actually just discovered this myself, and I was listening to it, and I was like, this sounds like really accurate to sort of the sound of that they had in the documentary. And then I watched Ricky Beato talk about it, and he also mentioned it. And he said basically this is what it was supposed to sound like. Because I don't know if you know the history, but what happened was they made these songs, and then the idea was to have it be like raw.
Yeah, sort of back to the roots. No more studio shenanigans. As it's played, you can hear it.
And they did that, and then was it Glenn,
yeah, the engineer.
He mixed it. They didn't like his mixes. And by the way, interesting enough, you go listen to the mixes. No offense, I don't know anything about Glenn, but they sounded really horrible.
Oh, okay.
Those mixes are really bad. You should listen to them.
Okay.
Nothing like the sound in the documentary. Nothing like probably what it sounded like in real life.
Okay.
I could be wrong. Check it out. And then they're like, let's not do that. And then they got this producer called Phil Spector, or mixer/producer. And he, at the time, was known for this quote-unquote wall of sound type of mixing, which I imagine was probably the equivalent of like a Chris Lord-Alge of today.
Yes.
If anyone knows.
Yeah.
Modern producer who produces rock music, and that's, very much the 2000s sort of era.
Just a full sound. There's no air.
Waveform is just like...
Your ears there's something happening at every frequency, at every single time. It's just there.
It's like super punchy. Everything is clear. Yeah. Everything is like mid-rangey, punchy. Everything is just like sort of like the limits of what rock and
if you
roll
grew up listening to 90s and 2000s like rock, and then you listen to something from the 70s and 60s, you're like, what the hell happened? Where's the dynamics? Where's the balls of this music? That's how. So
I'm guessing Phil Spector was sort of the Crystal-Alge of that time, and I think that he was
Crystal-Alge,
bigger sound. The Crystal-Alge.
Crystal-Alge.
Indiana Jones and the Crystal-Alge.
Exactly.
And so they sent it to him, and then he made the final Let It Be mixes. And for instance, a famous example is Let It Be, where he added strings, he added like, echo, reverb, filled it out, made it more dramatic. And a lot of the songs he did stuff like that. And I think I read that like some of the band members weren't happy with it. And
there's too flashy. I think probably George was complaining that it's
probably George, but I know Paul didn't like it.
Okay.
And which is interesting because, again, like this is why I found it very fascinating, which is like, I would 100% agree with him. It's like, if you're going to do this project, and you have a very specific sound and vibe in your head, I would be super disappointed if it ends up being just like a polished commercial release. Super lame. And so basically in 2003, from what I read here, Paul and Ringo, the project was initiated by Paul McCartney, who felt the original album's producer, Phil Spector, did not capture the group's stripped down live to tape aesthetic intended for the album. I'm like was having a blast listening to this album because it sounded like the stuff you heard in the documentary. Very just the tape. You hear them play, and I love listening to the whole album. I loved tracks like "Get Back" was a super fun one. Dig a Pony. I don't remember. All I want is you. Dum ba dum da dum ba dum ba dum.
I remember I Me Mine, the little waltz.
Yeah, that's
that
George.
John danced
I've got
to.
a feeling. Remember that one? I've got a feeling. Dum bam ba da ga ba dum with that little guitar in the beginning.
No, I'm not grooving to
Interesting.
to these
Don't Let Me
titles.
Down. I like that one as well. That was great. Across the Universe. I also like that one a lot. John Lennon song.
It's
You
interesting.
remember that one?
You mentioned that for you it was like was great for you since you are looking for songs and like finding the context from the artist's point of view, to seeing these two and see how they influence each other. Like it's as like I'm on the same page as Pishta. I don't care about what the artist is going through or thinking of writing this. To me, like those are complete different things. Like there's the documentary and there's the songs. They don't exist connected like at all. Like I didn't even think about like how like musically or lyrically, just completely different universe. And I think it's like it's very interesting because to me personally, the reason why I don't care about artists is not like, oh, I'm some kind of asshole. I'm like, I don't care, what you've been through and or whatever. It's just that I like my art. My favorite art is like where the artist, like David Lynch, who doesn't explain what the motivation or what the inspiration is like that, because it gives you the opportunity as the listener to then interpret it how you like it. Because I feel like, to me personally, it's stronger that way because it's connected to him instead of learning.
But see, that's interesting to me. It's the opposite, but it doesn't have to be necessarily the motivation. I don't have to have things like I don't
spelled
need
out
to know
right.
the
Okay,
meaning.
but at least context, right? Like what were they a part of your life?
That's what I like.
No,
because I think you can't. For me, I just love that because it's like I think that at the end of the day you can separate it, but I think if you looked at like causally, it's like here's the music is there because this person wrote it. You know what I mean? It's like I don't think this stuff just comes out of thin air and just appears like magic. I think it comes from a person, and that person has a billion different things going on in their brain and in their lives and stuff like that. And it's a combination of that. That to me is fascinating. I kind of look at it that way. It's like a sum of everything that person is going through in musical form. And then if you look at this in this context, it's a group now. It's not just one person. It's like a group going through this, struggle to like make something, and it could even be bad. It could be like a bad result. But that to me like brings a lot more weight to the songs, and that's why I like it, because then I feel like I learned like sort of a, there's like a much more like deeper sort of like meaning behind the songs. They don't have to be like amazing songs like my favorite songs, but like when I listen to, let's say for instance, like Get Back Now, I think about, oh cool, man, that's when like Paul was writing that. They did that and then they did like 20 takes. It's like then they're on the rooftop and you can see how happy he is playing those songs on live. It's like he's having a blast. It's like they have to practice that. It's like John's there and wow, John's actually having a good time playing that too. That's cool. And then you reminisce like, it's kind of like they're in a way they're like reminiscing of the good old days of the Beatles. All those things tie in together to make it, for me, a much more interesting listening experience.
That's very interesting.
So that's why
it's basically the opposite. It's exact
opposite, yeah. Because that's why I get like a little bit angry. It's like, I mean, I'm not super passionate about this specific like Let It Be versions, but it's just like it kind of makes you upset. Like, oh well, everyone knows, I don't know, Let It Be with the sappy strings. It's like, but that's not really the song. It's like that's a version of it. But that's like now changed and augmented, by Phil Spector, who did this because of that context of them having to push it out and finish it. Like this is the more the real thing that they were trying to do.
How do you feel about like covered? Like let's say covered, like many songs throughout the history, the original song written by the original person isn't the famous version. Maybe it's like third version down is like the most famous one.
That's okay.
Is that like also like upsetting? Like that like the disco poppy version of someone's song is
no,
now.
I don't think so, because again I look at it sort of like in a sense like, well, it just happened to be like that, and that's interesting to me. It's like, okay, well, the first person just people didn't connect with it, okay, but turns out the cover, or like, maybe like a loop or something that happened to
like the sample, right?
Pop culture, yeah, like a sample. That's a fascinating story. Like, let's learn about that and let's see how that got there.
Okay, it was just
people resonate with that.
Yeah, I was curious.
So that's why to me, like it's more fun to like understand the context and the, you know, of the songs, and then you kind of have fun. It's a bit of a journey then listening to the songs. And that's why I think this Let It Be, it's called Let It Be Naked, is like,
okay, that's the version
like
of those,
yeah,
how they're meant to be.
Yeah. And for instance, like Let It Be is very just like how they played it and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my take.
Yeah. And then the Beatles broke up. it's you know what's the saddest moment of it? So by the time third episode was happening, they're doing the live performance. So I'm listening to it. I'm not as paying attention as much as I'm kind of reading. I'm kind of reading about Beatles as they're playing on my phone, kind of figuring out the pieces. Thinking about, you know, learning all this history and stuff like that, and I'm reading about the breakup, and obviously, you know, they talked about. It's funny, like, you know, now it's such a big thing, and you know, you can see how realistic it is. But after it happened and the movie came out, anytime somebody asked them about the experience, they just said, "Oh, it was miserable. It's just nothing really happened." They didn't even release the album afterwards. They kind of hated that whole experience of that this was documented.
The band?
Yeah, the band. Like they always said, like, "Oh, it's just as terrible." No, you don't ask me about that period. Like they hated that period of you know, because right before the breakup and everything. So they hate about that. But we were talking about like the reasons why they broke up. One of the big ones was after their manager died, they were looking for who's going to manage the band afterwards. That's also a source of strife. You know, John Lennon is not really you know, being the leader anymore, and Paul's like really trying to be the leader, and it's not really working with George, and Ringo's just chilling there. But yeah, and one of the thing is Paul wanted his wife's dad to become the manager.
That's right, yeah, because he knew him and stuff.
Getting flashbacks from Sepultura, why they broke up, and then John
got like seduced by this guy apparently,
and this is in the documentary. So there's this moment, and
oh yeah, that's right, yeah.
Paul is gone, Ringo's somewhere with someone, and it's just George and John, and then John is like, "I'm sorry, I don't want to talk about this too much, but I just met this guy, and he's like the best." And just like hearing John talk about
understands us,
how amazing this producer, and finding out like this is the bane of their like breakup and existence of this guy, and then even the engineer Glenn Johnson telling him, like,
"Oh, that's right."
He's like, "I don't really like him. Like, you know, like he's one of those guys. You like." I think
he basically warned him, like, "Be careful" or something like that.
He's like, "Oh, you ask you a question. If he doesn't like the answer, he changes subjects. I don't really like him. Like, you know, I nothing against the guy. I just don't like him." And John's like, "I know, but it's like he's great." It's just like,
that's so crazy. That's so,
it's so sad to see, you know, something before, you know.
Also, do you know the other little bit of lore, which is interesting, was I think it was also John and George talking. Might have been in the same convo, where George is like, "I just want to make my solo albums." He's like, "I really want to make
It's like it's so many songs, and it's like such a hard time to get these songs into the band.
Like, I want to just make a solo album. He's like, "And we can still do the Beatles stuff, so I'll come to do the Beatles things, but we'll all do sort of solo albums." And John's like, "Yeah, sounds good." It's like, you know, makes sense. Make a solo album, we'll do other stuff. And then looking back, it's like Paul wasn't there. And it's like, then they asked Paul today, they're like, Paul's like, "I wish I was there." Yep. He's like, "Maybe I would." You know, it's like so like ridiculous.
It's so funny, you know. I was just like, the first time I was like, just like thinking like their communication and just all of it is like,
it's like, how did they not tell each other this stuff?
That was like the big,
so funny.
In the end, it was like the biggest takeaway, just like how humanizing and how real all of it is, the situation, and them as people, and them as, you know, some guys in their 20s of trying to work things out. It doesn't matter if they're Beatles or not, you know. It doesn't matter. There's 100 guys in suits and you know, working the millions behind them. It doesn't matter. There's a gazillion young girls, you know.
It's just
fanning them. It's still just a bunch of guys working out and trying to work as a team and having trouble communicating their feelings and their ideas. And they're friends, and they like to goof around and have fun. That was
mostly goofing around if you think about it.
Yeah, most of the time. And eating toast and drinking tea.
The toast was like so much toast.
They just ate toast. That's all they do.
I wanted to say that to me what was amazing is like how, like, that must have been a pretty big budget for this whole thing if you think about it, because like that's a
It's
lot
insanity. They did
Isn't
16
it?
millimeters, so it wasn't 35 for this. And they even say that
Okay.
because it was like a little bit cheaper, but they still, that's a lot. They only,
Still,
yeah, I think they had
it's a
two
lot.
cameras running always at the same time, which is crazy.
I mean, that's not even like pretty unprecedented. Like back then, making ofs and stuff weren't really a
But that's
thing.
the
It's
insane director. I love that guy. I wish he got us.
just so much footage. It's like that's really cool. And then the audio, just so much audio.
Yeah.
Oh, since we're on the topic, this is a bit of a technical thing, but this is a crazy discovery. Another plug, YouTube video called Peter Jackson on the Beatles, Get Back and Technology Invented for the Docuseries. It's by a channel called Collider Interviews. So listen to this, Tim. Did you know this?
No.
That amazing. So the old footage that they had, the audio was a lot of the times mono audio, and a lot of times you just very unusable audio. Like for instance, you might have a sequence where there's just a lot of noise and a lot of people talking, chatter, and the mic is trying to pick up George at the end of the room saying something. Can't understand it. And
because George is speaking to one side.
And Peter Jackson said that like they had so much of this stuff and that you really can't use it.
Yeah.
And so they used machine learning.
Right.
They made their own algorithm, and they trained it and they tweaked it. And they said
AI had to listen to hours of George Harrison interviews.
But isn't this amazing? I just love the fact that it's like this came out now and they figured out how to do it well enough where you can understand. And they also said that they isolate. They can then train the machine learning well enough that they could isolate instruments. So they could just have drums, just bass and guitar. Very cool. I mean, I watched the movie. I didn't notice. I thought that was the original audio. So that's very, very, very interesting. And I think Peter Jackson was saying like that's a big part of why it worked, because they remastered and they also created the spectrum, the sound, right? So it's like a lot of that was mono. Imagine watching that mono. Horrible.
just all the sounds. If you want to try it yourself, there's an app called Moises.
Really?
And in a free version, you can import any audio. It helps if in the free version, you can just separate the voice from the music, and the paid one, you can separate each instrument.
So I guess this is pretty like...
Yeah, it helps if it's there's not a lot of effects on the voice, like too much reverb and stuff. Like sometimes it gets confused. But I tried it out to grab like some samples from some songs. Pretty good, man.
So if that's pretty good, imagine now what a custom,
and then you can do different iterations and do some mixing and some manual work.
So I thought that was a really cool technical sort of aspect of that.
That's
I
awesome.
think the remastering looked really good. There was like the Elliot Roberts, he did like a little bit of an example, or someone else on YouTube did an example of like showing what the original documentary looked like compared to the new one. My goodness, the original is like just like
16 millimeter is just
horrible.
like gross. I mean, when you start watching it, everyone's like buttery smooth and the audio is all funky, but you get used to it. Yeah, they're quite waxy and smooth.
But it's okay because you feel like the whole point is the impression is like you feel like you're there. That's the most important part. Like you don't feel it's...
Those visuals, they fade away really quickly and you just kind of get into
notice. I thought it looked good to me.
Yeah, they get into the whole thing, so it's cool.
Anything else I wanted to mention really quick about this stuff? That's about it.
Yeah.
In terms of the tech and all that stuff. What else is there? Anything else cool?
I don't know. It's been a while since I've seen it because I blasted through it. So I think there was a lot of like noise in my head around this that kind of has slowly faded away, and just like the most important notes stayed in my head. But
I have a weird note.
What?
Did you notice that the editing was a little bit weird in the first episode?
I think that's where they had the least. I don't know. I know
it threw me off so bad the first episode because it was just like cutting. Like someone would say, like, I don't know, let's go over there, Ringo, let's jump there. Hey, let's go. And I was like, what is this?
Yeah, maybe it was just getting used to it. Maybe you just got used to it. But
maybe, but it felt much more natural in the second and third.
Yeah, because like
episodes,
we said, like they had to like splice a lot of the audio to make like, and then use other takes of video that kind of look the same to kind of drive the story. I mean, Paul has seen it, and Ringo has probably seen it. And I think Peter Jackson said that they didn't have any remarks of like it being not real or not being truthful.
Yeah.
So
another story was also like Peter Jackson was talking to Paul, and he showed him like a clip about how he helped John write some song, like from John's solo albums.
Oh, yeah.
And Paul was like, I don't remember that.
There you
Like,
go.
I'll show you a video. And he's like, oh, okay, interesting. So I think that's also a cool aspect of that, because apparently Paul said that he kind of believed in like the whole tabloid stuff where they painted him as a bad guy, and he got roped up in that, and he thought like he kind of like, subconsciously like believed that, and he said that now watching the footage made him realize how
right,
that was all stupidity.
Yeah,
which is cool.
Any big takeaways for you personally after watching this movie? Have you feel changed? Do you feel like something?
Yeah, I think one thing I'm really happy about is like I've not seen something like this in years, and I think it's like super, super refreshing, because I think it's not for everyone. I think it's really for people who like to understand, sort of these dynamics and creating music with other people. And I thought it was really, really it was an enjoyable watch, because it's not a movie, it's not a documentary, it's just a documentation, of the sessions, and I think that's amazing. So my takeaway was just that I thought it was a really nice, testament to what it's like to create stuff, with other people, and to find your sort of voice. And I think that a lot of people have the wrong impression that making stuff is easy. Making stuff is very hard, and but this is very rewarding too, because at the end of the day, you make something that you're happy about, and you continue learning and trying to find what you like to make. So I thought that was pretty cool. What about you?
I think it's very similar vein. I think as far as my creative endeavors, mainly in music, this has washed away a lot of anxiety of things, of how things should be, and how should you approach this, and what you should think about. Just what we talked about, everything we talked about, just going through that experience. I feel like after watching that movie, I'm very clean from all this kind of built up presumptions and things and everything. I think it's very, for a musician or anyone creative, I think it's very clearing, I would say. And that's how I feel.
No, for sure. I agree. I think one thing I'm definitely envious about is like, I don't know, like also like as a musician and stuff, I've never really been good at like memorizing stuff and like sort of memorizing. Cause like these guys, they just know all these songs by heart, you know what I mean? And I think it's pretty big respect, for any band, but let's say in particular, like when you make a new song or whatever, I mean, they could play that, very well, and with, the feel they were going for and the vibe and stuff like that. That's something I'm definitely envious about, because like I pretty much like when I write music and stuff, I do it in pieces and stuff like that. And, it's like more of like a bedroom musician type thing. And I still have no answer to that. I guess maybe it's just like experience, or I have no idea. Maybe just like people are better at memorizing stuff. I'm horrible at it.
I mean, but the Beatles did both the things. They did, write the songs like that and memorize them. And then they kind of were free from that and just put whatever the hell they wanted on the record, one piece at a time.
On tape.
And created, you would maybe consider them like looking the process, a Frankenstein monster, but not knowing about the process. You just hear the end of the song, and it's true. It's a flow and beautiful song for you. So, but I did.
So interesting for you. Yeah.
Definitely. I think there's definitely, we talked about at the beginning, their history, of them being in Hamburg and playing 8 hours a night. And I feel like there's definitely, that's a repeating thing I see with a lot of bands, who are really good from the first album. And essentially it's just that they usually had some club gig where they just played together,
just constantly.
It does create that kind of tightness and that kind of, what you're talking about, of them remembering the songs because they played them 1,000 times. It's very tight. They know it. It also has its kind of, side effects afterwards. After 5 or 6 years, they basically hate each other because they done everything together, and then just, kind of like with the Beatles. But I've definitely seen that. Like even, you mentioned Rick Beato, and he said, when he basically learned how to play guitar, is they had this gig, I don't know where it was, like some club in Vegas or something like that, and they played 6 or 7 hours of music that night, and then they went to the after night clubs and where they played jazz improvisation for another 6 hours, and they did this for a month every single day. If you play
Rick Beato.
Yeah, Rick Beato. If you play 12 hours of guitar
all day.
all day, it's like, even if you're have no arms, you're gonna get better. So that's just...
So in general, I agree. In general, I think it was a really inspiring documentary. I didn't expect it to be this good. It's not even, I'm not talking about like a movie. I'm just talking about just really cool insight to see these people do all this stuff. So it was very inspiring for me. I guess just kind of a reminder just to keep working at whatever your craft is. I think that's it's easy to sort of give up, and I think it's pretty, it always boils down to, which is also a difficult thing to sort of come to terms with, but it always boils down to the factor of, in order to make something good, you keep having to make more of it, right? It's just a simple rule. It's like the more you make, the more chance that you'll be happy with something. And I think that's a pretty good testament to what you can see what they're doing. I mean, just, so it's cool. I think it's cool.
That's pretty cool. So thanks to the insane, crazy director who recorded all this footage. Thanks for the Beatles of participating in that recording. Thank you, Peter Jackson, for going through all this footage, remastering it, and making this awesome documentary. Thank you, Jake, for joining us this conversation. And thank you, listeners who are still here, for listening to us nerd out about this musical stuff.
I have a final plug, which is that there's a video of Peter Jackson talking to these Beatle fans about this mystery recording session.
Okay.
After the Apple
I haven't seen
studio
this.
sessions.
You need to send this
I will link it to you. It's by Robert Rodriguez channel. And
the director?
It's very, I don't know.
Okay.
Maybe it is. Look it up. And they're talking. And I love to see this because Peter Jackson is, it looks like he's a Beatles nerd.
Mm-hmm.
And he was talking to them, and it's a very fascinating conversation about how there's very little record of them, but there is proof, like photographic proof, and little, Glenn, what's his name?
I can't remember. Some Glenn.
Glenn's his like itinerary shows him going to Apple Studios afterwards, and they're like, there's some theories that maybe like they did some little overdubbing, polishing up, and stuff like that. So if you're a Beatles fan, watch that video. I thought it was really cool.
I'll check that out. Well, that's awesome.
Well, thanks, guys.
How you been, Jake? By the way, I don't know if people are interested. How you been? Yeah, I don't know when was the last time you were on this. What you were up to? How was your holidays?
Wow,
so many questions.
So I was on James Bond.
Yes, I don't know when that was.
Was that it?
I think so. Yeah.
There was supposed to be like Spider-Man, but then I couldn't do that.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's James Bond. I've been good, I think. I mean, learning what it's like to live a parent life, I guess.
Do you miss the podcast?
Do I miss the podcast? Be honest with you, I think that I probably would feel pretty like I would feel like a little bit of an obligation.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's kind of why I didn't feel like doing it anymore. And I think that it would be a little bit too much for me, like sort of like watching. The reality is I don't even watch that many movies anymore.
Yeah.
Because I just don't have any time.
It'll be just a chore to watch those movies.
Nah, well, it's not a chore. If it's a good movie, I'm interested. Yeah. Case in point. But in general, it's like, I don't know. When do you have the time? That's my question. When do you have time to watch movies? I mean, you have two kids.
Dude, like, honestly...
Like at 3 a.m.
Yeah, like my cinema's going was, the 10 p.m. But to be honest, like for the last 2 weeks, so our daughter, she goes to bed at 7. By 7:30, she's done. She's sleeping. So we're good.
That's there. Great.
And we got when our son was born in October, and until Christmas, he would go to bed around 8-ish and fall asleep. So basically from 8, this was our time. I could either work on some stuff as by myself and my wife, or we could watch movies or a TV show. And that was amazing because after, crazy day of 2 kids, the evening we get some times to ourselves or for ourselves. And then that all stopped for some reason. Our little 3-month-old kid decided that after our daughter falls asleep at 8 p.m., he's up and he'll be up until 12. And we'll have to carry him because otherwise he'll scream because he just wants to hang out.
Rock him? Like rock him?
Or just hold him?
Just carry him.
Just carry him because he doesn't want to sleep. There's nothing we can do to you can give him food.
That's
carry
interesting.
him.
And that's the current status right now?
That's the current status. That we have no evening. So I have no idea I'm going to watch any of these movies because...
That's what I was wondering. Because, for instance, for us, Ruben, our son, he's now going to be 7 months tomorrow. Actually, maybe when the podcast comes out, he'll be 7 months. And historically, he's been great. Like, it'd be similar to your story. It's like 8 p.m., 8:30, sleeping all the way till the morning.
Yeah.
But here's the question, though. Like, I mean, you have to also have experience with, like, listening in and seeing, sometimes Ruben stirs and you have to go in and soothe him and come out.
Oh, like, the kid... The small one, he feeds every 3 hours, so that's different.
Yeah.
But Agatha, she'll that's my duty. Usually she'll wake up in the middle of the night, gotta go there, calm her down, sit next to the bed, wait. Yesterday, she woke up at 3 and she couldn't fall asleep until 5. I was there.
So I think it's just good and bad days.
Yeah.
And of course, for anyone who's a parent, you also know that babies go through all kinds of developmental changes. And so, for instance, you might have a good week, great week, and then you might have a horrible.
Yeah, a baby week, might learn that they can see now faces, and then for 2 days they won't sleep because it's too overwhelming. Because it's like,
that's interesting.
I just learned. Like we read about this with Agatha, and we can just see it with Finn. It's like anytime they have a new experience or there's a new like leap of development, like they find their hands, they're literally too excited to sleep because I have hands.
Yeah.
I must touch my hands for hours now. So it's
looking at the hands for 1 hour before sleeping.
Exactly.
And you examine the hands.
You can't sleep. I got hands, man. Who's gonna sleep when you have hands?
Also, we were recently in the phase, I think like about a month or so ago, where Ruben learned how to flip on his belly.
Oh,
so excited! Like he can't sleep because he's like waiting to flip
to do the flip again.
He still does this, which is super annoying. He'll wake up first thing in the morning, flip, and it's like, dude. Wait, no flipping.
Imagine
he now does it also in the night.
Imagine if you had one thing you could do. That's the first thing you learn. Like you'd be excited too to wake up in the morning and to do.
I know. It's super exciting for him, but it's like it's a bit annoying because now it's like I don't know. It could be like early in the morning or whatever, 1 a.m. If you don't come soothe him, if he's too long, up and just flip, and it's like I'm now flipped. So I think everyone will understand these kinds of things. I think the bottom line is that. Good days and bad days. I think a lot of people have it worse. I think Ruben's a really good kid. I think Finn's. I mean, he's going through a phase now.
They're going through a phase, but he's a delightful little boy.
Yeah, he's a great boy. He's a nice little smiler.
He's a big boy and he smiles. He's amazing. He's the Stay Puft Marshmallow happy man.
Dude, I wonder. I'm really curious what's gonna happen with his weight. I mean, I think maybe it should have stabilized. Hopefully,
basically we're talking to the doctor. He's breastfed, so it's like he can't like go over some crazy limit. He can only at somewhat. So and also now he's reached the point where he's gonna start really growing. So that's gonna kind of like utilize. So we'll see what happens. Unless he's just going to be a giant at the age of 1. He's going to be like 2 meters tall.
He could be like a huge boy.
So we'll see.
Where are we at now in the phase? I am pretty excited to hear Ruben say stuff. I don't think it's like officially like words because that's like later.
Yeah.
But he's now like doing the whole, like
the sounds.
Ma. I just love seeing how he just gets into it. He's just like, evening, like for instance, he might be like, from 7 to 8 is like time to practice my vocals. And he's just like ma.
Perfect.
But he's going through the teething thing.
Yeah.
We think
that's about time. It's about right time.
We could maybe this could be off the podcast, but I was wondering when did Agatha's teeth come in?
I have no idea. It'd probably run down half a year. Yeah, it's usually usually the time.
Was it lots of screaming and stuff?
No, just restless nights. Yeah, it's like after. Sorry, this is turned to kid podcast at the moment.
Yeah, this is good.
It really like it becomes a thing. You're like anytime like it's like it's been a weird couple of days. Like she's not sleeping, she's not eating, she's so angry. Oh, it must be teeth. And then you go and checking for the teeth. I was like, nothing. Something else. You might be sick. But if you find the teeth, it's like, oh, there it is. We know what it is. It's the teeth. They're coming out. So they'll be part of your like next year and a half. You're going to be doing that. It's like, what is it? Oh, it's the teeth.
Yeah, I figured that's it.
Yeah. All right.
So yeah, other than that, been doing pretty okay.
Lovely.
New year. I finally have, first time in my life, I have a list of goals for the year. Isn't that good? Improvement. There you go. Before it would be like wifty wafty, but now I have a concrete list. I think I have 13 goals I'd like to do.
Fucking hell, 13, year. Man. You're going so.
But no, starting the world.
Starting how we're going to invite you at the beginning of next year podcast, and we're going to ask you
which ones I did.
Yes. And we're going to check upon Jake's 13 goals and see how he did.
Fine.
It's going to be best.
Well, because I heard someone tell me that like something they learned was like you have like 15 goals, but you do like a goal or two every month.
Okay.
So it's like you just go tune like in blocks.
There you go. There's your motivation. Embarrassment.
So I don't know. Do you have any goals?
Do I have any goals? No, I usually have like a theme. I'll go like, okay, this year, like I'm going to concentrate on this. This is the focus.
Like overarching.
Yeah, overarching focus. Like
thing.
Whatever is happening, because life is crazy and I'm not the most organized person. So it's like, if I can concentrate on this is going to be a good positive outcome in the end. So
that's a good one.
So that's and I can reveal this year I'm gonna concentrate on physical health, because that has been very strongly forgotten and basically diminished over last year. So I am gonna concentrate.
I'm very frightened of what I'll become if I don't. Also,
I will have a heart attack at the age of 40 if I don't do something. So that's what I'm gonna work on.
True. Good. That's a good theme, actually.
All right. Well,
that's about it.
Thanks you for listening. This is the first Twofold podcast of the year. Sorry, Phil's not here. We will return to normal episodes soon as possible. We're going to do a live stream this weekend. We don't know the exact time yet. We used to do these on Instagram, which are great, but Instagram's kind of wonky. It's good that it notifies you guys, if you follow us, that the live is happening, so you can join in, but it's kind of wonky, and people have been asking if we can do it on YouTube. So the next live stream is going to be on our YouTube channel. Just look up Twofold Podcast on YouTube, and we're going to put it 2 days beforehand, like this reminder, so you guys are notified over it. And yeah.
What is the live? Do you do just random?
We usually have a theme. It devolves into randomness, but this time we're going to talk about our top 3 movies of 2021. And we want to hear your top 3 movies of last year.
In the recap, right?
Yeah, kind of like a recap, but we want to hear other people's like picks of why they pick those movies and why they like them. So we're going to be chatting up on YouTube.
Last question, Tim, since we're reflecting on the years and the years ahead.
Yes.
Do you, and connecting it to the Beatles,
okay,
have you had time to do music?
Not necessarily this, like, seriously. I've always it's a very therapeutic to me. I think making music to me is the most thing it does for me. It's therapeutic. It's kind of like like meditation kind of thing. Yeah, letting yourself be. So I've done that.
It's kind of like playing, like maybe like guitar, or something.
Writing, exploring, whatever it is. Just this kind of very intuitive feedback thing. But I'm planning to do.
Nice.
I'm planning to do some music. And I think, funny enough, this documentary, what I said, about washing away anxieties. I think this documentary has helped me put in a right mindset of doing some more music.
That's great. I think that's great news. For me, I would say that it's unfortunately past couple of months have been pretty dry in terms of like writing stuff. But I think also that therapeutic element has been a little bit replaced, because me and my wife, we sing songs to Ruben before his bedtime, and we've been doing it every single night since he was born. And we have a set list of like 6 to 10 songs. And so that's kind of been my music, and it's fun because it's kind of the Beatles style.
Yeah.
We played through all the songs. Like there's no like, oh, I screwed up a chord. It's like, no, you got to play through the whole thing.
Yeah. You should record it. Like to do some stuff. Record it as they are and put it out. The songs for Ruben to fall asleep to.
Yeah, it would be cool. But, I don't know how it is for you, but it's like something that's a bit of a struggle for me is like, The hardest part about writing your own stuff is like just like the additional work it takes to like do all the other stuff, you know, like not just like the guitar and this, it's like the other stuff. So I don't know how that is for you, but it's the hardest part.
Oh, as far as production, I love that stuff. It's the rest of the stuff, the promotion and the mastering and all that. That's the evil part of it. You know,
evil, truly evil. But anyway, here's to 2022. I hope that you. Oh my goodness!
Wait,
Ruben. I hope that you.
That sounded like one of those, you know, kazoos. Just right as you said.
I hope that you make if you're planning to do a couple of songs or an album or whatever, that you do that. I have a couple of things also in my head that I like to do. Let's go ahead and do those things.
Let us.
2022. Here we go. Thanks, everybody. I'm going to go now.
Okay. Bye-bye, Jacob. Thanks
for having me. Bye-bye. See you next special, I guess.
See you sometime. Bye-bye, Jacob. And then there was just me. I'll call Philip, I think. Philip. What are you doing, Philip? Oh, Johnny, can you whip us some new music for this? Because it's a special. I don't feel like playing deal. Yeah, something Beatlesy, right? Okay, good. All right, that's it. Bye.